Welcome to PMS, Philosophical Musing Sessions. My name is Ilana Gilovich, and thank you for joining us on this late autumn evening. Thank you so much for being here and for being. I think there is something essentially luteal about this seasonal moment that we are in. It feels like there's sort of a whiff of melancholy and nostalgia in the air as we're all poised on the top of a slide, about to go down into autumn. Or in my case, very much failing to practice non-attachment and just clinging extremely to the last leaves of summer. So for all of you, may we all unearth the richness of this seasonal fermata, this time of suspension and change and bidding farewell to what we're attached to. It's really hard to go down the slide. I have been clinging to summer in my last luteal phase. For everyone who's just joining us, that is the phase right before a woman has her period. And I'm getting signs. I'm going to trust. Love that. We love a lighting cue in this economy. We live for it. But in my last luteal phase, I was really clinging to wanting to be outside. And there were several different red flags or warning signs that I was entering this very cantankerous, spicy phase. I was sitting on a bench in the park with my notebook because I wanted to do work and be productive, but also get my outdoors time. As if being outside and basking in the splendor of nature is something that you can just check off a list perfunctorily, but that's what capitalism will do to you, and that's what it was doing to me. And so I was very intense by getting my outdoors time. And this woman comes and sits down on the bench next to me, this tiny little old blonde woman, and she is cooing in ecstasy over the baby that she's caretaking for. And this woman was not the baby's biological mother, unless she is a medical marvel and figured out how to conceive at age like 75, in which case, go off. But I don't even think she was the baby's grandmother. In other words, the genes weren't talking, there was no biological imperative at play. But nevertheless, she is exclaiming over this baby, she's talking to the baby, she's giggling in delight over the sheer fact of this baby's existence. And while I'm here grumpily doing my work without even looking up at them, I've only registered their noise as a nuisance. My first thought in the midst of my ornery luteal phase is, ugh, get a room already. And I look up, clock them, and think, wait a minute. This is the emblem, like the living embodiment of joy, of intergenerational connection, of deep presence, of celebrating life, this tiny pint-sized pocket of life. And these are the instances that we should be designing our schedules and societies around, not as intrusions upon our work, but actually the whole point of life. And I am the problem. I am what's wrong with America, so we've solved it, we can all go home. But that moment was such a revelation for me. And the reason I bring this up, not to just be rambling into the microphone at you, is because this series was designed to explore this central question of where do we find meaning? Where do we feel most alive, most whole, most fulfilled? And how do we then design our systems and civilizations around those feelings? And I'm really curious and invested in this question as an experienced designer and as a storyteller, because whenever I embark upon a new project, I am starting with the essence. I am starting with the why. And so when I look at the beginning of any creative enterprise, it's where's the beating heart? Where's the spark? Where's the flint? Where's the rapture? And how can we build and design around that? Otherwise, it doesn't have substance. It's just junk food, as it were. And so I have been thinking about this because I look around and I'm wondering if our societies and civilizations are being designed around that beating heart. We're busy. We're really productive. We're talking to robots a lot, it seems. We have a lot of stuff, and we have a lot of stuff to do. But I'm not sure if we are connected to our most authentic, untamed, revelatory selves. And so this series is designed to seek out that nectar, that beating heart, that essence of that question. And we do so by calling upon sources of wisdom that we don't often see embedded in the fabric of contemporary Western life. So one, we are designing this around women's bodies, specifically around the phase of a woman's menstrual cycle that has historically been denigrated rather than celebrated for being emblematic of too much, too messy, too chaotic, too ruled by big feelings. We are also invoking the wisdom of plants to see what we can learn from the more than human world. And finally, we are soliciting feedback for this central crowdsourced question of where do we find meaning and delight in life, and how do we design our lives and systems around that. Mm-hmm. So for that reason, this book, Kindergarten Sweep here, is going to accompany me to every PMS session. And I invite anyone who wants to, at the end of the session, to come up and write your answer to where you find meaning. You can write in it as many times as you want. As we've learned from the menstrual cycle, you are different many times, many weeks, and many months, so your answer may be different each time you attend. And I'm actually going to start out tonight by reading one of the previous answers from our first month. I love the question of what are we here to do? It's making me think of a post I saw recently. I've been wondering if it's just as important to ask ourselves what we are not here to do. The post goes like this. My daughter, I hope there's an animal somewhere that nobody has ever seen, and I hope nobody ever sees it. Here's to what we have witnessed, what we shall witness, and what we were never meant to. Like that one. So please come up and add your answer, and we may read it at a future time. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce my co-host and my guest tonight. My co-host is the mighty chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemums, often called the unofficial flower of autumn, have been cherished for over 3,000 years since their first cultivation in China. They're celebrated as one of the four gentlemen of Chinese art, alongside plum blossoms, orchids, and bamboo, and they symbolize autumn, nobility, and resilience. They appear in countless poems and paintings. You have one of the poems there on a printout. Beyond their beauty, chrysanthemums have long been valued for their medicinal properties. Boiled roots were once used for headaches, their leaves can be eaten fresh or cooked, and their blossoms are brewed into a fragrant Chinese tea rich in antioxidants. Kids love antioxidants these days. That is said to cool the body, ease fevers, relieve congestion, and strengthen the lungs. Certain species of chrysanthemums produce natural insecticide compounds still used in organic gardening today. So if you want to not use pesticides, you can use stuff with chrysanthemums in them. The symbolism of the chrysanthemum varies across cultures in the East and the West. I found this really interesting. In China, they represent elegance, longevity, and virtue. In Japan, they're sacred, tied to the imperial family and the chrysanthemum throne. While in much of Europe, they're considered flowers of mourning, placed on graves and used in funerals. In the United States, they're more cheerful, signifying friendship, joy, and honor. This duality makes the chrysanthemum a rare flower that holds both solemnity and delight, an emblem of life's impermanence as much as its enduring beauty. And I love this East-West distinction for what it means in different places of the world. It's something we've talked about so much, the different ways that you bloom in the East and in the West. And also when we think about PMS, it's a reminder that we can be both and everything. We can be a symbol of mourning and death and life and joy at the same time. So please join me in welcoming the chrysanthemum. Thank you for your wisdom. And 3 people are welcome to take these home at the end of the night. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our guests for tonight. Monica Dogra is a multidisciplinary award-winning artist who has released 11 studio albums with major record labels in India, acted in over 7 feature films, and has worked on non-fiction visual content that has garnered an Emmy nomination, Casual, and won the Cannes Lion Bronze. She was a judge on India's version of The Voice, a show called The Stage, which hunted the nation for the finest English-speaking talent. Monica is a student of Vedic philosophy, having studied deeply with Himalayan monks for more than 8 years. Her mission is to sing back into consciousness the impression of godliness latent in all beings. to create a world where all are able to live in abundant states of service. She's the founder of the Authentic Voice Method, a somatic healing modality that explores the power of personal narrative to tackle public performance anxiety. I need this. This method has been showcased around the world at conferences and events. Monica also works one-on-one with thought leaders, helping them to identify blind spots, weave devotion into their current set of obstacles, and ultimately break through to greater states of fulfillment and success. Thank you so much, Monica, for being here. Athena Diaconis is a multidisciplinary artist, researcher, and strategist whose work explores the invisible currents between people, systems, and power. With a background in ethnographic research and design, she has spent her career teasing apart complex, hard-to-define problems, working across government, nonprofits, and Fortune 50 companies, including the UN, the Department of Education, Google, Meta, and more. Her work spans domains such as social policy programs, organizational culture change, brand and service design, and physical environments, always approached through a lens that considered how human behavior and systems shape one another. She was a TEDx speaker on democracy, design, and speculative futures. I watched this, I highly recommend Googling it. And a founding team member of one of the first social impact initiatives using blockchain to empower cooperative farmers. I'm obsessed with that. Currently, she is director of strategy at Hush, a Brooklyn-based experience design studio, and the creator of Nature of Power, a conversational art series that invites people to reflect on the meaning of power in their own lives. Thank you so much for joining us, Athena.
Thanks for coming.
So, Monica, I want to start with you and talk about the voice method, because I was captivated by this process when you first described it. I am somebody who has very much struggled to find my voice, most metaphorically and literally in terms of singing. And the way that you described your method is that you are seeking pathos in the authenticity of a particular person, harnessing their lived experience and bringing that into the channel of their voice, which is so stupendous, and I think relies on this concept that we all have innate magic. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the method came from personal experience. I was a student of musical theater at NYU. I would get psychosomatic, spontaneous laryngitis out of fear of being in front of people. And then slowly I started to study fear, how it existed in my body, what it would do, the energy of it, the somatic experience of it, the sweat, the pit in my stomach. And the more that I started to perform, the impression of being received, started to calcify in my body. And that gave me this, you could say, battery. I'm like, oh, people like me. Then that became an addiction. And then I lost my authenticity in the addiction of performance and approval, only to fall from grace in a very public way, be canceled by millions of people, and then go back and discover that there was something about why I was known and why I was accepted that was a precursor to the addiction of approval, or like the dopamine hit of like, oh, people like me, that works, I should repeat this over and over again. And really what it was taking all of my scars and all my shit. And I used to have to get very drunk in order to do this. I sang in a rock band, and I would get on stage, be really altered, but basically like wail my stories in front of hundreds and eventually thousands of people. And then I heard what I sounded like, and I was like, we shouldn't do that anymore. We should be sober when we perform. And so I was like, we're not doing that anymore. But anyway, it broke something open for me, who, as someone who's inherently very shy and would really struggle to be in front of people authentically. So then when I was a judge on the stage, which is like The Voice, but the Indian version, I started working with these people who had the most insane voices, sang much better than me, and I was like, why am I here judging you? This is ridiculous. But I realized that it wasn't enough to be an incredible voice. What we're longing for as audience members is that feeling of humanity, that like raw expression of someone being like, this is my beating, fucked up heart. And you can hear it in sound. So the method basically takes somebody through a process of personal narrative. You already know this, so I'm gonna repeat it for them.
I love it.
Yeah. It takes you through a process of personal narrative, why you're attracted to certain songs, certain poems, movies, actors, and you start to see that there's like a theme in all of it, you know, that we're like unconsciously choosing, even lovers, even boyfriends, like these things that hit us. And it's as if, I remember hearing this from a coach, that the key to life is to walk to a wall that goes infinitely up, infinitely down, infinitely left and right, and it has little cubbies of scripts, and you got to walk up to that wall and be like, this is mine, right? Really easy, but actually, yeah, it is really easy because we've been subconsciously, unconsciously practicing the same narratives over and over and over again throughout our lives, through our choices. And so you go through this thing, you find the narratives, and then you reapproach your performance, understanding the narrative in a hyper-personal way, like so personal that you put your mom in the room, or you put your ex-boyfriend in the room, or you put your whoever, whatever it is, that's the highest, your frenemy, the highest state possible that you're losing your mind when you're saying these words. And by losing your mind, I mean losing your performance and entering into a state of sublime authenticity because it matters that much to you. And once you activate that, the energy of fear, it's like like the sun through a magnifying glass, and it becomes pointed. It becomes very, very specific. And it changes the way you sing, it changes the way you sound, it changes the way you look. And there's no way you could hit a bum note, your voice could crack, you could collapse, but there is no way that the audience won't feel you because you're willing to bare your soul. So that's the method, kind of describing it loosely, but it works every single time. It's kind of cool that it works every single time. Yeah.
In your own practice, do you have a protocol for getting into that state yourself, or is it now so much ingrained in you that you're able to sing with that kind of pathos every time you get up to perform?
No, I think it's something you have to revisit again and again because different things put you there at different phases of your life. I don't perform as much as I used to, but I mean perform. So now I sing devotionally, and that's like a whole other method or non-method of no mind and trying to forget my stories. But when I'm performing or even acting, a lot of it is about finding the truth of the memory that lives in my body. So, for example, just acted in a film and totally, I mean, it was not a far reach for the reality that I've lived. But yeah, it's the same every time. It's like I see a scene and I put myself into a somatic experience of a not so distant lived experience in my being, and then I bring that to the scene over and over again. I'm sure, are there any artists here, actors? So you guys all kind of know. So the method, it just gives shape to this thing that we probably do anyway. And it's very, it's basically taking something that we do unconsciously anyway, especially as performers or actors, and giving it a protocol in a way, you know, that's done in groups and then can sometimes become like a very healing, what is it called when you have a catharsis, like a cathartic experience, especially in group settings.
I love what you're saying because I feel like it's an opportunity to tango with tension. Like I've heard this with, certainly in the immersive theater world, they wield and capitalize on this, but how more than seeing an actor cry, to see an actor be on the verge of tears right on the veranda and hold it back, or more than kissing someone, it's the moment right before the kiss. And so to figure out how we interface and encounter tension, I think is so beautiful in this allegorical way that we're talking about the luteal phase too, which is historically very tense and very fraught and very churny. And I would love to talk to you about this because Athena and I have had some really interesting conversations about madness and about how we think about the wild and the untamed. And I feel like this phase of the month, and it can be applied to people of all gender expressions, but whatever that dark underbelly is for all of us, how do you think about madness? How do we accept madness? How do we dance with it?
What a rich question with so many layers. So I've been really diving in, as you know, to Western and European philosophy recently, and was struck by Foucault's definition, or sort of his definition of how madness comes to life. And he describes it as, this is not exactly what he says, but almost a hangover or caused by the Enlightenment, which as a sort of student of many things of the West, I thought, well, that seems strange, because my understanding of the Enlightenment is it's such a great gift. It's what brought us liberalism. It's what brought us, all of these incredible things that make our society so great. Why is he saying it's this kind of product of enlightenment? And what he posits is that we, through enlightenment, created reason, which gives us incredible things like the scientific method, but it also created this kind of containerization of what is right and what is wrong, and madness as being this antithesis of reason, as being anti-reason. And it struck me because there's a history of schizophrenia in my family, and it's a very close experience in my life of seeing someone, what we would call, lose their mind. It's a fear in my life. It's sort of this undercurrent of my own family's history. And to have that definition and see that it was this idea of madness is also simply a construct. And looking historically at other cultures outside of the West, looking at indigenous cultures, looking at other cultures who actually revere a sense of madness and don't call it madness, gave this life in my body and this curiosity of a kind of reconciliation with this part of me, this part of my history, this part of the world that I think I have tried to avoid because it has just felt untouchable and hard, and I exist in my world in such a state of logic because that's what makes me move through the world. It's what's helped me to create my life. And this idea of madness starts to become defanged for me. And I think it relates to the luteal phase because there is that feralness. When you get to the proximity to your period, even just after ovulation, you start to kind of unwind. And I notice that my mind goes from working in a state of analytic kind of reason, quite literally, where I feel like I'm good at my job. I know how to do this. I can do the presentation. I can figure out the problem. And instead starts to speak more in poetics and more in this kind of blurring of lines between what I have been taught to know and what I feel. And I don't know if I yet have that fully figured out in my head, but it's really started to create some interesting openings in my life of how we, create systems, how we think about people, how we relate to this idea of what is right and what is wrong, what is reason and what is madness, and what causes us to be afraid of the person we feel like we can't reason with, we can't logic with. And, I think that has slowly dripped into other parts of our society where there are many, political polarities that exist in our world right now, not just in our country. And often the barrier is, you don't understand me, you are crazy, you are mad. And I wonder if we start to question what it means to be mad, what it means to be reasonable, and we more so just say, I want to be with you. I want to feel what you are feeling, and I just want to sort of understand your humanity, if that can offer an invitation to more reconciliation amongst, ourselves internally, but also the many different factions that I think are in quite literally warring today.
The word that brought tears to my eyes was containerization, this idea of separateness, and it does feel that, that madness seems like a sane response to what's happening in the world. And it seems crazy to go about our jobs and our lives feeling like families are being torn apart and children are being starved, and we're in this little silo and in this little bucket where we're meant to just continually produce and be on our own and yet witness these global atrocities. So I love the idea that madness is almost the key we can put into the lock to try to find that common humanity and feel that connective tissue between all of us. And I'm also curious, the three of us had many of us had a really interesting conversation about power. And I'm thinking about the latent, dormant power of whatever the luteal phase means to you, whatever the chrysanthemum means to you, whatever the subversive forms of beauty and knowledge and cosmology mean to you. When I was in my first luteal phase, kind of the partial genesis of this idea, I was with my partner, beloved fiance, and I knew I was being a little crazy. And I didn't want him to absorb it and metabolize it. So I was like, here's my TED Talk on what I'm about to say, with a million different caveats and a million different things that I placed in front of it to say, don't take anything I'm saying seriously, because I know I'm in my luteal phase, and let's disregard this in a week. And to his credit, he kind of looked at me and was like, well, what if we just trusted that as intelligent? I'm happy that you're giving the caveat, but also I'm willing to go on this ride with you and see if there's some innate wisdom in the madness.
Bless them.
And then, bless the man. But it led someplace quite fecund and fertile and generative. So I want to talk about power, because we all talked about power and it was really fun. And you were working on a conversational art project called The Nature of Power. And you were going to be interviewing everyone from dominatrixes to politicians to school teachers, the whole bouquet of society. Can you talk to us a little bit about this project and what excites you about it?
So I think it for me really started actually when I was, it's funny, coaching women who were sort of just coming up in leadership. They had just gotten that big job, and I was brought in to kind of help them figure out, how do I manage people? How do I think about being a leader? What does that mean? And I found myself feeling as though these women who were incredible and alive in a lot of ways, they wanted to do it differently. In sort of simplest terms, they wanted to do it differently. They felt like they didn't want to be the boss that they had, which was mostly men, mostly white. They wanted to sort of be in relationship to their teams and in their relationship to power in a different way. And there wasn't a great set of principles. There wasn't a great set of tools and resources to say, here's another way to do it. And I think this has echoes in many other parts of the world and life. But it got me on this course of really thinking about, well, then what is power? How do we create alternative systems of power that are these, invisible yet highly influential forces at play? And there's obviously a lot of literature of, the intersection between power and politics, and having worked in policy, I thought about it even then. But I'm really curious to understand individuals' relationship to power. I did a sort of small experiment where I asked people to meditate and then write down when they feel most powerful. And one of the most interesting things so far in what I found is how many of those were not strength or these kind of more dominant traits of power, they actually, for the most part, were people saying, when I feel joy, when I feel in connection, when I feel like I'm in harmony with the world. And I'm really curious to ask, I have a background in research and spent a lot of time in my early career going around the country and sort of largely working in lots of different communities throughout the states. And it prompted a question in me of how we think about the constructs and the ideas that influence academia and sort of these ivory tower institutions, because a lot of, often research is done on college graduates or, college freshmen. And so bringing more diversity to the language of power is something that feels like kind of the most democratic thing I can do at the moment, because more voices need to be a part of that conversation. And I think we are in a moment where the landscape of power is shifting, or at least there is a desire for it to shift in many different directions. And so more voices should be included in that. And so that's my goal.
I love that. I'm curious for you, Monica, talking about power and also talking about alternative futures and alternative power structures that we could believe in. By the way, September 7th, the most fantastic show I've ever seen is closing. John Proctor is the villain. Raise your hand if you've seen this play. Yes. You must go see this show. I'm not going to spoil too much. The closing scene is a confrontational expression of power that is artful and cathartic and liberating without being violent. Like opposition without violence. Power as a very incendiary invitation and confrontation, but not having cruelty or a sense of domination. So I encourage everyone to see that as a model of the kind of power we could wield. But you have spent so much time in, I think, so many different worlds. I think you have such a cosmopolitan, multifaceted perspective on life. And also, you have been in traditional mainstream power structures and industries. And then you've also taken a hard left pivot in your life and studied all of these deep philosophies and more ascetic lifestyles. So I'm curious how maybe your definition of power and of wisdom has changed throughout your life.
Yeah, I love you both.
Vice versa.
Yeah.
We're getting into it. We're getting witchy.
I'm like a day away from my period. It's like on, I'm like, why haven't you started bleeding yet? It's just, I feel crazy. And there is a secret in it, and there's something powerful. And I was telling Athena before we came up here that I just get I get crazy with it now. Like it's like how sorry, this isn't an answer to your question, but
Let me answer.
So many feels, and if I take them too seriously, I treat my boyfriend badly, or I yell at someone, or I freak the fuck out. And instead I'm just I often say to my friends who are comedians that enlightenment, is comedy a lot of the time. It's like taking the harshness of what it is that we live and just being like, this is fucked, it's like, nobody knows what the fuck is going on, it's fine, that there's something so liberating about that. And
yeah,
I was remembering the conversation around power and Cape Cod and the idea, and when I was falling in love with you and already in love with you, and I was like, power is the most corruptive force on the planet, because my lived experience of power when I felt the most powerful in a subscriptive way has been when I was most visible or most famous or most written about. And I saw what it did to me. And then studying with monks and sages and being a part of communities that I thought would be the antithesis of that, and then experiencing the power dynamics with what happens when everybody's bowing at the feet of this sage or this saint, and uncovering the corruptive, poisonous power dynamics of that, and my heart breaking there because I expected it to be different from mainstream entertainment. I'm like, this is where everybody prays. Why is this so similar to that? It's supposed to be so different. And my answer today is I don't feel powerful, but I feel faithful. When I feel best is when I feel like I'm not the doer, when I feel like I'm a servant, when I feel like I'm trying to get in the river and let it carry me, and take all my talents and my toolkits and my pen and my microphone, but as a servant to something else. And I'm not trying to lead, and I'm not trying to take credit. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who, it's one of those friendships that's survived. Like I'm one of those people who's lost like everybody and everything over and over again. And sometimes I am like, is something wrong with me? Like, how come I don't have a friend from high school? Or, I've been married, I've been divorced, I've been like, the rooms I'm in look nothing like the rooms I was in 5 years ago. Yeah. So sometimes I feel like there's something wrong with me that's happening. But when I feel my best and my most compassionate self, I look at the relationships that have survived, and I see how they are like so deep in the heart space, and they survive for a reason because we accept each other's evolution. And so anyway, he and I both are initiates with the same monk. So we took vows side by side, and we were talking about how right now, one of the things we're mourning is like the ego. I mourn my ego sometimes. I'm like, it felt so awesome when I'm like, I'm awesome. I did that. Like, it felt really good. And now I never get to feel that anymore. And sometimes I miss it. I'm like, where did I go? Who is I? What is I? And then,
That's madness.
Madness. And there we are, So we were talking about that. I'm like, doesn't matter what I accomplish. I don't ever really get that, like, I'm amazing, like big dick energy anymore. I'm just like, I guess I'm nobody and I'm nothing, but I'm doing things in service to you. Thanks. That's more the like dominant voice now. Yeah. And I miss the material. I am still materialistic. I'm definitely not devoid of ego. And then the last thing I wanted to say, Athena, is you said something so beautiful, and I was just so filled with love around madness and what it means to hold views, and to be around people who are not like you and be like, I just want to listen and I want to learn. And I feel like if we, as the privileged ones who aren't, in the war zones, can't do that, how can we fucking expect there to be peace anywhere? We have to be able, and that's not to say like what you feel is correct or what you think, but to have that heart space that can expand when it wants to contract and judge and be like, even though I don't agree with you, like I'm mad enough to love you right now. And for me, when we pray to Buddha or Jesus or any of the great saints, masters, and mystics, they were the ones who were like, and I know this is controversial to say, but to look upon the one who has crossed you and love them anyway, I think about that all the time, and I just love how you brought it in and the way that you brought it in. So thanks.
I've heard it said that enlightenment is the ability to hold a multiplicity of perspectives at once, and the more perspectives you can hold and the wider the bowl, the more enlightened you are. And that actually makes me think that it's like tangential to or a cousin of something quite schizophrenic. And the way that we diagnose schizophrenia versus enlightenment is that the voices are somehow disruptive or warring as opposed to collaborative and cross-pollinating. And I think about how siloed, how separate we are. I experienced this in my own life with the divorce. It was really fascinating because I was deeply in love, still love this person, fell in love, committed to a new person. And the reaction was often, well, did you not love that first person? Was that not the real story? And that broke my heart because I was like, in what world does it have to be one or the other? Why is it not more and more and more? And I've actually discovered without the restrictive container of having to share the same life, my love for that former husband has blossomed even more because I get to cheer on the life that he would have. And so there's something in that dynamic that I also recognize in socio-political events where recently I had posted something about Palestine and feeling so sad. And somebody wrote to me and said, well, aren't you worried about the hostages? And I just had this moment of being like, in what world would I not also be worried about the hostages? It's just, and I understand it, where no one's regulated, we're all freaking out. But there was this feeling of how have we become so impoverished and so singularly focused with our empathy that we cannot contain those multitudes and we cannot embrace the madness of what it means to care for so many people and so many perspectives at once. So anyway, that's my rant for the day. But I'd love to get into the meat of this question around Athena in your life. Where do you find beauty, substance, meaning, joy? What lights you up? What turns you on? Tell us.
I was thinking about the movie Soul. Has anybody here seen Soul?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's so good.
It's so good. Watch it again.
Yes. Let's have movie night there.
Yeah, so good. You know, it's got its flaws, but it's really good. And I was so struck by one of the moments at the ending because it was sort of the encapsulation of what I feel like is the meaning of being alive, which is not what is necessarily the thing I'm here to do, which I actually think is still relevant and kind of comes post you understanding this sort of reason for existing. But broadly it was, you know, the guy's a musician, for if you haven't seen it, sorry. He's a musician, he dies, he goes up to some version of like a metaphysical world,
Right,
and
it's not heaven.
it's not, which I also love.
Love
It's
it.
very, it's sort of, they're like, I don't know, it's a thing. Let's just like
Yeah.
think about it, or I guess not think about it. But he encounters this soul who is very much rejecting going to Earth, does not want to go to Earth, and finally realizes why they want to go to Earth. And it's to be alive. It is to be in sensation, to be in a body, to be in the things that a soul does not possess, that a physical being possesses. It is to be in the materiality of the world and to feel. And, you know, I have found in this point in my life where I think I was, you know, just trying to survive for a lot of years, where I was just sort of on this path that I needed to go on, and very much, I mean, I said it earlier, I lead with logic a lot, I'm like very in my head, that in parts of my life falling apart, in parts of my body falling apart as I age, the more I have found meaning in the sensation of the world. And when I say that, I mean like the beautiful sensations of the world, the you know, breeze that comes through just as like fall is starting to come in, that's really crisp, and suddenly you kind of smell leaves and you smell the earth feel a little denser. The sunset, the hug of somebody you love, even just watching, I was walking through my neighborhood last night and the rattling of cups of a restaurant and people talking in this sort of like harmonious love language of conversation, those things to me, when everything else is gone, feel like what they bring meaning to my life. Because there are the big moments of like really high highs and joys, and I think that can become really hedonistic where you're just chasing pleasure, and it's not about that to me. I think if that's, you know, your thing, that's great.
Yeah.
But go for it. But it also has this quality of meaning that for me has existed even in some of the most painful and greatest periods of suffering in my life. That it is not bound to suffering, it is not bound to pleasure, it is just like this feeling of wholeness, of connection, of love, of sensation. It is sensual in nature. Yeah. And but it's not sexual.
Yeah.
Right? It's just this,
It's lords around it.
it is just truly being alive. It is being vital in my body, in my spirit, in my being. And I think that is what I hold on to when all else fails, is just the gratitude of being in a body that is alive, that can feel, that is in connection with literally the material of all of this.
Yeah. So beautiful. And I also want to ask, because you are a designer, an experienced designer, and you think about architecture and structure and space, when you think about those moments and how to incorporate them and pluck them and bring them into your daily life, how do you envision a world in which those things are central? Athena and I just went to, do you want to tell them about the exhibit we went to?
Oh, no, you should. You're a better storyteller than I.
What was her name? The woman?
Oh, I forget. She's this really, Phyllis. She's this really amazing, lesbian architect. The exhibit is still on at the AIA, I think, for like another week. It's really delightful and just so beautiful and cool. And
You guys
she's
have to
amazing.
take me to these things.
Yeah. But she ran this experiment, and it's an experiment dear to my heart because I think a lot about this and have for many years, where she asked, this was also, I think it was the 70s, so gender binary was not yet quite as pervasive an idea, but she asked women, and she asked them to draw what their world would look like, what a home would look like. And these drawings were so poetic and silly and playful. I think one of them had, I don't even remember what all of them had. I have the photos of it on my phone, but Ilana and I went to this and we're just giggling because this feeling of girlhood, of womanhood, of even just, if you remove gender from it, the kind of aspects of, let's say, more feminine characteristics being in the built environment was so foreign in the world we live in now. And so to see, these things that could never be made, but the exercise of imagining was so powerful that it literally transcended decades of years. And these were not good sketches. These were not, cool architectural renderings or like amazing blueprints. They were literal markers on, pieces of paper.
It was like a room for screaming and tacos.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, yes, amazing.
And it was like a garden and then a forest and also a desert and then maybe a stream and also then like somewhere to watch the stars, but a really cozy nook underneath that.
Yeah. So I want your version of this for life, casual.
For life. Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's what I'm asking myself now, so I don't think I have a complete answer. But when I think about, I guess I'll take it and say, like, what would space look like to me if I was more in touch with the sensations of body, of connection to earth? I mean, there's lots of heritage around this that I won't feign to sort of pull from right now, but there are amazing communities that have existed long before the States who have thought about urban design in many more interesting ways, and I'd say more harmonic ways with the planet. And I would say I would not necessarily, I don't think we can go back. I think it's really hard to undo what we have today, and I think that's okay. There's amazing things that modernity has done. But for me, the biggest one would be creating more soft edges in the world, creating buildings that had less right angles, creating, worlds and communities where cars were not the thing we optimized for. I think cars are awesome. Transportation is amazing. I love being able to go drive and see my parents. But having, it's very basic, but having cities that are walkable, centering the core aspects of living, connection to others, food, shelter, clothing, play in a more central function. There's lots of interesting research around kind of different ways that urban centers develop. We have a very particular model where we kind of go up, which going up can also be really beneficial to create more diverse housing, but we tend to lose the idea of like grouping of communities. Brooklyn does it actually for the most part pretty well, where you have kind of each not even just borough, each neighborhood kind of has its own sort of center, right? So you can walk to, for the most part, a grocery store. You can walk to a park. You can walk to a neighbor even. So I think I'm still, because I live in this world, I'm thinking of it so literally that I'm perhaps less imaginative than those ladies were.
Yeah. The soft edges.
But I think a lot of it is it's soft edges. It's thinking of just a greater sense of beauty in the physical material and the physical design that we bring in.
And Monica, I want to hear your answer to where do you find beauty? Where do you find meaning? Who's on first? I love it.
Yeah, what lights you up?
So we were also joking about how I'm like, it's 8 p.m. and you're asking me to go somewhere? Like, what? I used to DJ in clubs and like, yeah, I threw festivals and now I'm like, it's 8 p.m., let's get in bed.
Yeah.
While we were walking here, my partner and I were like, we're going to a bar. Whoa.
Dad and mom's night out.
Yeah. Because I think there's something in my soul that because I was so enmeshed in that way, and so enmeshed in, like profile on Instagram and like being performative and getting kind of lost in that I feel the most alive in moments when I'm so infused with hope for Brooklyn right now. Like so many people showed up to listen to us talk while we're PMSing. Like that's amazing. And there are moments where like my closest, dearest friends are like Instagram averse and terrified to be on social media. And, I'm one of those who's experienced so many permutations of industry where like I started on MySpace and then Facebook and adding everybody on Facebook and then like Instagram and then understanding the algorithm like likes naked. So, and that entire companies or investment and money was flowing to wherever there was numbers. So we had to play the game for the numbers and just to be like, whoa, okay, none of this feels good. What feels good? And, I go to spaces and I'm like, I'm narcoleptic. I just want to go to bed in a fuzzy blanket. But then the moment someone sits down next to me and asks me a heart-led question, I'm like, zing, and suddenly I could be up till 4, 5, 6 a.m. Victoria, my partner, will joke about that. He was like, there she is, she's on. I'm like, ask me about feelings. Ask me about what you really, really think. Tell me about your traumas. Let's stay awake until 8 a.m., like that. That's when I feel the most alive, is when I really feel like we've come here to expand and to get free, and the only way to do that is to learn how to witness, to learn how to study ourselves, to become the awareness that's watching, to like reside in that space as often as possible. And then to be that for each other, to like my favorite friendships are the ones where someone can tell me the hard thing, like, Monica, you know what you just did? And I'm like, but do you love me anyway? Okay, I'll listen because you love me anyway. And I trust your witness. Like the hardest relationships are when the mirroring from the friend feels like it's clouded with stuff and then I don't know how to be in that anymore. But the beauty and the ras, like that's a Sanskrit word for nectar, but like ras is in music, it's in art, it's in a room, but that nectar, that feeling, that intangible feeling that impregnates the air in the room, like we all know it, for me, that's where I find the most beauty and the most joy and the most aliveness, and it can happen anywhere at any time. And then talking about beauty and cities and building and the new world is like, I have this theory that in the next wave of consciousness, like the Vedic view is we have a yuga that's ending and a yuga that's beginning, and we're kind of in the sunset, sunrise period. And so there's an acceleration of darkness, but there's also, the polarity is increasing. So there's also an acceleration of light, the density of light that's making itself known. And I really feel that sometimes, you know, like in my being, and I'm like, holy shit, it's like we're getting stretched like rubber bands to be able to hold all of it. And yeah, if there's a wish or something that I notice myself doing, it's like where we're going, it can't be a construction of the wounded mind, you know? And so all of us who are in positions of leadership, it's like we go to these nexuses of great thinking mind, like COP27 and like all these like the billionaire conventions, and I'm like, we all need to meditate and get out of our egos before we start riffing. It's like Einstein on the bucket, like right before he, you know, falls asleep, and then aha, you know, whoever discovered we could eat tomatoes and they wouldn't kill us. It wasn't from the thinking mind.
Right.
It was from an intuition. It was being guided, but legit, right? Like turmeric. Who decided turmeric? Like, how'd they figure that out, you know? When we're on a precipice, our greatest ideas, they don't come from the thinking mind. They don't come from what we've known. They come from a place that's beyond us, and we have to figure out how to get in that space more often and create from that space.
Yes.
So, that's all.
Love this. We have one more question, and I would love to take it from the audience if possible. Does anyone have a question? Yes.
So I really love this operational definition of enlightenment and madness, and like how they are overlapping and how they're distinct.
Yeah.
With that in mind, I'm really curious for all three of you what the conversation between those states, like as we define them, madness and enlightenment, has been like, or like emblematic moments of that conversation between those states.
You want to go first?
I got a lot to say.
Yeah,
I
you
always
should
gotta
go
rein
first.
it in.
You're
though.
itching. I want to think about this.
So,
That's a good question.
it's an amazing question. Because I'm one of those who's sat at the foot of the masters and been like, but what the actual fuck?
Yeah.
You know, I like shameless. I'm like, you live in a cave at the origin of the Ganga, like, why? If when we die, we go somewhere amazing, why'd I get sent here where this feels like bullshit? You know, I'm like a kid ready to ask those questions, like, why separate me in the first place? Or, you know, when you do Vipassana and they're like, anicca, 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 and I'm like, well, what if, like, anicca from what? You know, like, I ask all those questions. And I get answers, you know, sometimes the answers drive me crazy, so there's the madness, but there was one answer that really like hit beautifully that's come to me recently, which is, well, the first thing they said was, you know, if you believe in the cycle of life and death over and over and over again, which is a Vedic view on life. And I'm like, well, then we die. I want nirvana, I want moksha, I want to stop being born and dying, but then what? How do I know I want that? You know? And they were like, well, at least do you want to be free from suffering? And I was like, yes, that would be very nice. So is enlightenment to be free from suffering? Maybe that's one view. Then the next thing that I asked was, why separate me from why separate me from this eternal Brahman, like, magical thing? Why did I come here in this limited body that will decay slowly until I die? Like, why? Need to watch Soul again. And the beautiful story I got back was, and I'm a musician so I understood it, is without separation there is no song. Without separation there is no story to enjoy the way back, you know, to follow the tension and ease into the harmonic. And, you know, we know that in music, right? If it was just one note, there'd be no movement. There would be no symphony. So I'm like, okay, I like that answer too. And the last thing I want to share with you is with one master, this is really hardcore. And I was the translator for all these pilgrims in India. And this woman came to grieve her son who had died. And there was a master who you know, ascetics, they give up everything. They give up their name, they give up their parents, they give up everything. And she's like crying, and I'm translating what she's saying to him. And one of the things she said is like, tell me how I can grieve my son. And the master said, well, do you cry when you see the baby on the street who could be dying of starvation? And she's like, well, no, you know, I'm more attached to my son. And he was like, well, enlightenment is eventually giving up all these attachments in order to acquire a connection to every being, to everything. And you know, from a like brain perspective, understanding, like I also got a reading where, and maybe some of you can relate to this, where like a priest in Tamil Nadu, South India, was like, no relationship with mother, no relationship with father, no relationship with family, relationship with all. And I was like, when he said it, it like hurt. I was like, fuck, I want a relationship with them. But you're a woman of the people, so you're denied these things. In the absence, in the void, becomes an exaltation of all that is. And I think there's something that's mad about that, you know? That's like, I will give up everything in order to acquire everything. And that's where divination often exists, is in that paradox, you know?
That's so beautiful. And what a gift to like work with all those teachers. That last one struck me because I think it lands with what my like personal experience, I think, with feelings of madness and feelings of enlightenment and what they are in my body. And for me, madness feels quite tactile. I know there's a moment when I feel as though I have hit that state where I feel mad. It is as if my brain has edges, but there is a pressure against it, and I can't get out. And enlightenment often comes afterwards, when sometimes myself, sometimes someone who is guiding me, like a therapist or a coach or a friend, offers a light, literally, that lets me release that pressure. And suddenly I realize those walls aren't there, and I am beyond those walls. And what I feel, and I think my own practice, you know, partially in trying to understand my aunt better, partially in trying to understand kind of how it works in my brain, is that I am seeking to exist in a world where I feel less of that tension, and where those two words actually feel more synonymous. Where instead of resisting the moment where I feel like I can't understand, I release and allow myself to feel more connected to all of the things that are bigger than me. That I allow myself to be in trust that this too shall pass, that this moment is simply me clinging to an ego, to an identity, to an attachment that I have. And so while it is certainly in practice, and I think I hit one of those moments like a couple days ago, you know, my hope is actually that those two things feel less at odds and become a lot more in harmony.
Yeah, we're talking about pressing right up against the skin of life in ways that are very tactile and visceral and authentic and true, and require an incredible amount of devotion and surrender. And my very salient experience of madness, which I sound like a walking cliche, but I'm like, white girl doing ayahuasca, but it was in Peru. I did a lot of it, and it made me go crazy. But I ultimately realized that the deep fear that I had of madness in those states, and then experiencing it and getting to understand the layer of sediment beneath it, which was my fear of going there, was disconnection. What I was afraid, the fear of having a psychotic break, the fear of becoming schizophrenic, is to detach from the current of life, the river that we're in, experiencing this connection to other people, and there's some deep, latent fear of my reality not matching up with the reality that I want to share with everyone around us. So really, I think enlightenment is that, being able to connect and be with. So on that note, I invite everyone to close their eyes for just a moment. You don't have to if you would like to. And just taking a deep breath together, breathing in and breathing out. And one more when we breathe in, all the love and beauty and meaning and substance. Breathing it out, sending it out across this room, across Brooklyn, across the globe. May all beings be safe, free, known, and loved. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you to Dead Letter number 9, our wonderful home. Thank you to Nina, our filmmaker, Sarah, our producer, the wonderful chrysanthemum, and our amazing guests, Athena and Monica. Thank you so